Hi, and welcome back to the What Happens Next podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping you navigate whatever's next in your lives. Typically, when clients come to see us in their 50s and 60s, as a chartered financial planner, I get to have amazing conversations about how much money is enough and helping people navigate where they are to where they want to be financially so that they never need to worry about money again. But the interesting thing is, whilst money plays a really important part when you're thinking about what happens next, there's also a bunch of different challenges that come with that period of transition. Challenges like, where do we find purpose? What happens to our identity when we change our lives and work becomes less prominent? And how do we maintain social, physical, intellectual, and community well-being? And that's why I'm really pleased today to have a conversation with Pradip. Not only has Pradip gone through his own what happens next moments, he now helps people navigate their own what happens next moments. So he's got the insights from his own life and the insights from the work that he does with clients. We talk about a number of topics on this podcast, including managing those overwhelming choices that feel really pertinent in retirement, reflecting on what we did in the past to inform what we can do in our future, looking at a bucket list and seeing what else we've still got to do, and looking at our heart and mind to see what it says about what we want to do next. We explore loads more, but without further ado, let's listen to the interview. We're on a mission with What Happens Next to help as many people as we can navigate the next chapter of their life. So I need a favour. I'd like you to visit our YouTube channel at What Happens Next Life, and we'll make sure we put a link to the YouTube channel in the comments. Enjoy the videos, like the ones that you get benefit from, but most importantly, please subscribe. We want to help as many people as we can with What Happens Next, and subscribing to our YouTube channel for free is the easiest way you can help us. Welcome to this What Happens Next interview with Pradip. I'm really excited about today, Pradip, because I think one of the things, for me, when I'm thinking about planning my What Happens Next in a few years, the challenge that I face is thinking about, who am I as an individual? What's my values? What's my purpose? And how do I use those unique talents and skills and attributes to define what's next in my life? And often I think sometimes when we speak to people about what happens next, the starting point they use is, what am I going to do? As opposed to who I am. So what I'm really interested in doing today is having a conversation about that re-navigation as a stage of life we're talking about who we are. But before we start digging a bit deeper into that, tell us a little bit about you.
Absolutely, Chris. Thank you very much for having me on your show. It's a pleasure to be seeing you here again. As you know, my background, we've come a long way. I started my early career in project management, a lot more people-oriented. So I had to coordinate a lot of activities and knowledge and things, including financial side of it, which led to my next phase in my life, which was into financial accounting and management. So I built up my career, not just an ordinary accountant, but a lot more with a wider perspective. I was more interested in how the business works and the decision makers, how they made the decisions, and what the impact was on the bottom line figure. So it gives me a dynamic of human psychology and understanding of people. So more of a people person, really. And then eventually, like we all have a phase in our lives, a turning point in my career, I went into management consulting, because basically that's what I was doing in the corporate world. I was going into different parts of the company and doing troubleshooting. So I went into the big wide world and had an absolute fantastic time, 7 or 8 years, globetrotting different countries, different cultures, different work type, different sectors and projects. So it all really opened up my mindset and also gave me huge experience and knowledge about people dynamics. Wherever you are on the globe, we have similar issues. Cultural differences doesn't make any difference. Language, geographically where you are, we're all human beings with the same level of aspirations and needs and wants. And then eventually I came to a crossroad in my life, as most of us do. Some of them may pass the crossroad and go to the other side, not realizing where they're going. But that crossroad gave me an opportunity to think about where I've just come from and what I've accumulated, like you said, the knowledge and the skills and experience that I've accumulated. And it was a wonderful place to be. And it gave me an opportunity to think about what next can I do in my life. And
So
that's
when was
when
that you? When was that crossroads for you?
this what I'd say when I turned 60.
Yeah.
So that's where the changing point in my life was, and a huge changes as well, because I came off the corporate ladder, and then I decided that having an introspection and thinking about my life's journey gave me a lot of resources about who I am and what I've accumulated in my life, and that gave me an opportunity to decide what next to do in my life. And the reoccurring theme was people and the issues that we have. And a lot of it came from people, more mature people. Maybe it's a cultural thing, or it's just I was exposed to it from a very young age to mature people. And I got to learn about the apprehensions about next phase in their lives, the issues that face. Some of them, mind you, did extremely well. They knew exactly what they wanted to do, and they lived a very fulfilling life well into sort of later age in their life. On the opposite end of the scale, there were people who hadn't actually thought about it.
Mm.
Basically, because we as human beings, we have a mentality of being in the 20s, our 20s, and we think we are full of energy, there's a lot of time ahead of us. But there are defining moments in our life, when a youngster tells you, you got growing hair, or, offers you a seat on a train or a bus, and you think, well, hang on, I can't be that old.
Well, I suppose part of the challenge with that, and I speak to my dad about this quite a lot, because my dad's, so I'm 46, my dad's 74 now, 75. I was just turned 75. I was coming up 75 now. And he says to me that in his head, despite sometimes his body telling him differently and knowing intellectually that he's older, in his head, he still feels like he's in his early 20s. You mentioned that you reached this moment in your life at 60 and you're thinking about what happens next. How long did it take you to get to a point where you've really worked out what was next for you?
Uh, Actually, it wasn't until about mid 60s. Um, because, to me, I thought, I was working in this sphere already. I was coaching people into designing their life, but I never actually thought that, I could apply this to myself.
Yeah.
Not until I had a reminder from DWP saying my pension is due.
The letter comes and it's like, oh yeah, it's coming up, isn't it?
And I thought, oh my God, I'm at that stage now. And earlier that, when I was 60, I just went for a basic prescription. So the doctor says, nowadays it's all electronic. You don't write handwritten prescription. He says, go to your nearest pharmacy and pick up your prescriptions. No paperwork. And he says, by the time you get there, it'll be ready. So I went there merrily thinking, I have to pay a prescription charge. So I was just about to take my wallet out, and this nice young lady said, "Oh, Mr. Mistry, you don't need to pay anymore. You reached a golden age." And I thought, "Good Lord!"
You know what? I mean, what I tell you what I've been writing and thinking about a lot, and it's something you mentioned a little bit earlier, is how sometimes those tracks we run on in our lives and in our careers mean that choice isn't taken away from us, but it does make our life easier. And there's a really amazing book that I love called The Paradox of Choice. And it talks about the fact that choice is great, but actually too much choice paralyzes us. Because if we've got the option to do anything we want, if we've got a particular career path or a particular profession where others have stepped before us, there's a route through the jungle then, isn't there? We know where we're going. But then we enter this where we can do anything with our lives, and we've got the time and potentially the money to do it. And the ability to do anything might mean that we struggle to do the ability to do everything might mean we struggle to do anything because it's too much choice. So how do we then get to a point where you got there at 60 and it took to 65 to go, right, okay, here's where I am. How do we make sure choice doesn't become too overwhelming?
You're quite right. I come across this so many a time. It's a common trait that we all go through because, like you said, we've had limiting choices from when we were growing older, and you get a sense of direction. People guide you through it. You have mentors, you have parents, you have teachers and trainers. So decision making makes it easier. But when you reach your age, you think, well, where do I start? And it can be very overwhelming because there's a mixture of excitement and anxiety as well. That what if you make a wrong decision, or what if you choose the wrong thing, or have you got enough resources, or have you got enough talent, and have you got the health to carry you forward? So all these things can be overwhelming, but to manage that is actually take some time and space out from the hustle and bustle of the life that you've led. It's
Yeah.
what I call the hamster wheel. It's not easy to step off that because you think, oh, I'm doing okay. I'll carry on as it is. But sometimes, at least slow the wheel down a little bit, so you get a chance and space to think. Now, trying to do it on your own can be very difficult unless you're super smart and you know yourself inside out. And there's very few of those who can actually determine what they want to do and pick from the resources they have. But for majority of us, they need a bouncing board, somebody to reflect their ideas, thoughts, concerns, worries, and all sorts of things. Even simply being overwhelmed, to chunk it down into manageable areas. So you focus on one thing, which leads to the next one and to the next one. You don't have to take everything in stride all in one go. You can have a wider perspective and say, look, these are type of areas we should be considering. And then we can drill down onto those areas and see what's there and then decide from it. Because by the time you reach about 55 to 60, you've got a wealth of experience and knowledge.
Yeah.
And it's first and foremost is recognizing you have something. Second thing is owning it, because often we are so humble we think, oh shucks, it was nothing. I can do that. It's natural for me. But recognizing for what it is valuable to you. It's unique to you. And then deciding what you want to do with it. How do you want to apply that resources for your own purpose primarily? And when you decide from that, it has a knock-on effect with your families and professions and so on.
Two really useful tips there. I want to just make sure that our audience get clear on. Number one, and I'd communicate like this: how do you eat an elephant? Bite by bite. Now, I'm not suggesting everybody goes out there and eats elephants, but that big what happens next question, you haven't got to answer immediately, right? It's step by step, bite by bite. Just make sure you're taking small actions towards that goal. So that was a super powerful tip. And then recognize your talents is a really interesting one. How do you do that? How do you know what you're actually good at? And who's the best person to help you along that journey?
I think initially you start with yourself because you know yourself better. You know what you've gone through, you know what you've achieved in life, and you know what you haven't been able to achieve in life. And they're both equally valuable. And, if you can get yourself some time and space quiet without distraction and just put your thinking hat on and go through, and the way I do it is do a timeline. Every decades of your life from 0 to 10, from 11 to 20, so on and so forth, and then populate it with all your achievement.
So
Right from
give me a practical. I love that idea, Pradip. But give me a practical example of what a timeline might look like and what you might put in each element.
Well, the simple way is here in your hand.
Mm.
Each digit represents every decade. So, you can fold down each digit of your fingers on your hand and you recognize how many decades you've gone through. So if you have 50 already, you've done 50. So one hand closes and you move on to the next hand and you start in your 60s. So that gives you a physical, visual timeline. And
Sure.
then you go through every digit that's folded from 0 to 10, and then you write down what you've achieved at school, in life, friends you've made, experiences you've had. We're quite good at from 0 to 10. We can have some good memories from our formidable years, the place we grew up, people we grew up with, and that is defines your life forward. Then you're into your teens, or from 11 to 20, and that's where your growth phase is, physically, psychologically, and mentally.
Yeah, no, I get that. But what am I putting? So if I'm writing out this timeline and I'm thinking about what to put on it, am I thinking what am I? I'm putting memories. I'm putting experiences that I remember from that period of time. What else am I putting on that timeline to allow me to think about what the future might look like?
It's unique for every person, because everybody lives with different experiences. So a couple of things you pointed out is something you've achieved in life, even if it's just a swimming certificate or something like that, or you got a excellent report from school. All these things add up value, and this is something that I did with my children. We created a portfolio of every certificate that they received, including my youngest one. When he was in hospital for a treatment, he got a little certificate for being a good boy. I said, keep that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I'm sure he still got it. And these things add up, because we forget these easily as time goes by, and you don't find emphasis on it. But then when you go back, you think, yeah, actually those little scores in life, little points, are actually valuable. Then you
Yeah.
go into your 20s, in your universities, and your academic achievements, the friends you made, any other things that you've experienced, maybe work experience, people you met, your professors you met, fellow students, and you learn from all these things. And if you achieve things grading wise, or even outside the university or academic field, these are all valuable points, because they carry you. I mean, when you're applying for work, they want to know on your CV what you've done apart from
Yeah.
university life.
Yeah.
So again, it adds value to your profession. Then when you're in
Yeah.
your adding everything you've achieved to move on to the next role.
Yeah.
So it's a
So
bit like a constant ongoing CV
yeah,
or
so
resume.
you're retrospectively looking back at your life and reflecting on what's brought you today to allow you to move forward.
Absolutely. Even right down to writing down people, the people who've been in your life.
Yeah, with the
Maybe
influences, right? Yeah.
absolutely. And it could be Auntie Ethel, who you absolutely hated, but she taught you something. And these kind of things are very valuable, because she will have taught you how not to do something.
Yeah,
And I
interesting.
find these things, because we tend to bury bad memories, but they are actually key points that's actually helped you grow up. So people are
Interesting.
very important. You could make a list of all the people who've been in your life, from work colleagues, well, all your relatives first, the friends you go up with, even if they're not around with you anymore. But at least the interaction with them, what you did together, what you enjoyed together, what you learned from them. These are all life experiences. So it's building up a picture of who you are becoming at the age of about 60. Then
Mm.
obviously when you're at university, you come across a lot of people, you do travels, you meet the professors, highly academic. So people are highly achieved at that stage. And
How about what like yes, we having that reflect I get why having that reflection is really important. How about getting to a point where we're thinking about what happens next? And at the back of our heads, we've still got an evolution to who we want to become. How do we then define that?
okay, it's
'Cause
a good question.
I mean, at 46, my life is a evolution as I learn more, understand more, grow, develop. I don't think that evolution can end depending on your mindset, but it continues, doesn't it? So yes, we look back, but how do we look forward from where we are and say, what do we want?
Okay, it's like building a structure. You're building your life. So your past is your foundation. So your foundation is built up of your memories and achievements. So next thing is, okay, what do I want to build from here? Now, you can reflect back on thinking what you haven't been able to achieve. That's a good place to start. I wanted to be an astronaut, but okay, if you can't be an astronaut now, you can join probably Richard Branson on his space shuttle or something like that. By this time, you might have money. So, do you see what I'm getting at? You have
Yeah,
aspirations when you're younger, and as you grow up, a lot of these are not fulfilled. So now's the time to reflect back on these, and you are the best repository of these knowledges.
Yeah.
And then you can bring them back, dust it off, and then you think, well, what can I do with this thing? Is it possible now within the resources and the means that I have? Do I still have any inclinations to do that? Okay, things like I wanted to be.
That's interesting. That question, what aspirations did I have when I was younger that I still haven't fulfilled, is
Absolutely.
a great question, isn't it?
Yeah. And then, as you come to present moment in time, you sort of look around you. And again, that list of people you have, you look at what they've been able to achieve. And you can get some inspiration of when somebody's achieved something. It's like myself, at the age of 60, I treated myself to a Himalayan trek. And I thought, that's amazing achievement. Even now I can talk about it, the experience I had and the training that I had to go through. So you pick up little inspiration from that. And even if you're a humble walker, you can step up and like yourself, you do marathons, so that's another thing to set up. So these are little, you build up your future, and you say, right, okay, I want to do these things, and you put your mind and heart and soul into it, and next thing you know, you've achieved it. So that's another sense of pride, and that launches you onto the next step.
Yeah, 100%. And that evolution continues. But I really like the idea of looking back to look forward. What are the bits that I said I was going to do when I was 8 that actually I've now got the time, effort, and energy to do at 60? Now, I may not be able to be an astronaut. I mean, now potentially anything's possible over the next few years with space tourism, but filling those gaps with stuff we that were important to us when we were young is a decent starting point, isn't it?
And I think just to add on that point, Chris, for inspiration, we're living in a digital world, and there's so much information out there. If you put a simple word in Google or something like that, it'll come up with so many ideas and things like that, and a lot of resources. So you're not short of inspiration there. And again, it could be overwhelming because you're spending too much time exploring that. But you need to pick something, at least one, to benefit from it. Otherwise, it becomes purely academic exercise about learning what people have done, and you don't do it yourself.
Yeah, no, I get that. Now, you mentioned something just now that brings me on to my next topic really well, Pradip. You talk when you're on the website and when you're speaking to me about this is about heart, mind, and higher self. Now, just to be clear, I'm an atheist. I'm not particularly spiritual, but I get why people who do believe in a higher being get a lot of comfort out of that. When you talk about heart, mind, and higher self, what does that mean to somebody practical like me, somebody who's a bit of a heathen?
It's there's no distinction, Chris. Either you believe, you have a faith, or you don't have a faith, but you have a belief system. And
yeah, that's true.
Enough based on your upbringing, your experiences, and when you experience something, you know how things fit in life and how they work. But the more you question your surrounding, because I'm a great proponent of life being a great teacher, you just got to be a good student. And you look around you, you get inspirations, a simple thing like walking, you've got an ability to walk. When you go out there, it's a different dimension. It takes you away from your doldrum of life routine things, and it expands your thinking. And you think, how wonderful is that? Then all you have to do is look around you.
Thanks for listening to the What Happens Next podcast. I hope you found today's episode really insightful. And what I'd like you to do now is take action to work out where you are from a well-being perspective, from your own well-being, when you're thinking about what happens next in your life. Now, what we've done is designed something that allows you to do that really quickly and easily. And that's the What Happens Next quiz. It takes 5 minutes to do, and you'll get the results in your inbox immediately. Simply visit whathappensnext.life/quiz to take the quiz now.
Another guide is, one hand, you got your 5 senses. You look at what you taste, what you see, what you hear, what you feel. They are your guidance system. So again, it says, what are you feeling? What are you hearing around you? So do you see what I'm getting into learning, mind,
100%.
body, and spirit can be a bit spooky for some people. But it's a different realm that you have innate ability that allows you to manifest things.
Yeah.
And that is
Yeah.
unique to you. And what you believe is unique to you as well. So, it's not about faith, it's about what your belief systems are.
Yeah.
Some of them, like
Get
you said, through an overwhelming scenario, it could be limiting beliefs. But if you open yourself into a calmer state of mind, it opens up a different way of thinking, different way of believing
and
around the world.
I'm a firm believer in curiosity. It's that, how important is an open mind, do you think, when we're thinking about what happens next?
I think very much so. It's a gradual process because we can become stagnant in the way we think. Because your situation, circumstances, and people dictates how you behave. But when you come to this stage, you are literally, physically, and mentally have to take yourself away from that space, so you don't revert back to it. And it takes a long time because we are creatures of habit. It takes something like 60 to 90 days to break an old habit. The older you get, the more difficult it gets. But again, when you're exploring this realm of thinking about soul and who you are, you're beginning to recognize who you are. I'm a special person. I have my own abilities. I have my own skills I've developed. I have my own aspirations. And again, you talked about purpose. What is your purpose? Now, your purpose could have been dictated from an early age that, you're going to go and study, you can become a professional, you get married, you have children. These are all societal parameters that you try and achieve. Then you get to a stage where you've done all these things and you think, well, what now? You could have been a provider for the family, to put the dinner on the table and provide a roof over your head. You fulfill that. Your family is grown up. Now you've got your own time. So that's when you have a loss of purpose. So then you have to explore what are the unfulfilled desires and wishes that you had, and also explore what else can you do moving forward, something you've always been interested in, or you haven't had a chance to explore something. So the key word you use, Chris, is curiosity. Curiosity can open up different worlds for you and avenues. And you have no shortage of inspiration. You've got the digital world out there, you've got people to talk to who are doing things. Even when you go on a holiday, you get a chance to talk to people you'll never see again. So you get an inspiration of what they've been able to do in their lives. And it gives you an idea, actually, I could do something like that. If I don't know what it's like, I'll have a go.
I think other people's stories are infinitely interesting because it's that element of turning around and going, well, that perspective then informs the way that you, and you use a really interesting word. It's that art of the possible. It's like, actually, if you've had this story you've been telling yourself and you meet something, go, well, they're not that different to me, and their realm of what's been possible in their life has expanded. You turn around and go, well, actually, what I want to do is probably possible as well. It's that being curious by expanding the possibilities.
It's also breaking. Sorry, Chris, breaking through that limiting belief because you've grown up with a certain mindset. And when you say, okay, I'm going to explore and see what else I can achieve, and there are tools and techniques that are available that you can use.
Tell me about
that. Projecting yourself. I mean, let's take a simple example. In a business, you had a business plan. So it's a tool. It's not something you beat yourself up with if you don't hit the target. You just sort of twig it and say, okay, I'll meet up the next target. If you exceed, you think, oh, well, this has really worked well. Now, same type of tool can work in your life. You have aspirations. Simple thing, you talk about faith. When you hurt yourself or you're in a dire strait, what do? You ask. Maybe you ask yourself or you ask somebody else. Or if you're a person of faith, you pray. And in that process, what are you doing? You're asking. So the art of asking, we forget as we grow up. When you're under 10, you have a habit of asking. And guess what? It's usually given to you, within reason.
Yeah.
But as you grow older, you forget this 3-letter word called ask. And that's when it's very important to ask. It doesn't matter who you ask, where you ask, what you ask. Just learn to ask. And you'll be surprised the resources you need will fall into place. People, places, situations will come around you. And when you see the magic of that, you realize that, yes, my next step is to achieve things with ease.
I love that. The magic of asking. Tell me a bit about the last time you asked for something and the positive impact it had on your life.
Very recently. It happened, last week. I was going into the city and I just got on the train. It was about 11:30. And I closed my eyes and I said, I'd like to hear this news before 12 o'clock. You wouldn't believe it. By the time I opened my eyes up, my phone rang and it gave me the news I wanted. I
Okay.
thought, how magical is that? And that really made my day because I basically closed my eyes and asked. Not anybody specific. I just asked. And that was in my mindset. So
Interesting.
that's a very recent, but I've got umpteen number of these examples throughout my life of asking. And, when we ask, we think, oh, we have to ask somebody. It doesn't have to be. A prayer is asking. There is an obscure environment that you ask in.
Yeah.
And often the case is resources coming. It's basically what I call a human energy. When you want energy, you plug yourself into something. And this is exactly similar thing. You plug into that energy that gives and delivers. So you have to learn to believe in that. Otherwise, it becomes sort of, hocus pocus thing. And you can call it black magic if you like. But if it works, it's a reality.
I wonder for somebody like me who's not particularly spiritual, whether that's a change in mind. See, my natural tendency is to think about how that links to psychology, and actually there's definitely links between how a mindset, a positive mindset, and how the world reacts to us, because it turns up in the way we are in the world. So yeah, it's a real interesting one. Here's what I want to ask next. Talk to me about some of because I know that you work with individuals who are thinking about what happens next, going through that change and wanting to navigate that successfully. Talk to me a little bit about the unique challenges we face when we're thinking about what happens next, particularly at that stage in our lives.
Initially, it's if you ask a direct question to somebody who's busy in their life, it's a denial phase and not recognizing that you are at that phase in your life. Because we cover this, we still feel like we're in our 20s. So, and sadly, I do find people even in their 60s thinking they are still in their 20s with the same energy. So first and foremost is recognition that, your mindset could be young, but your physical body is aging. And you can see that from, the aches and creaks and pains that you get once in a while. And also the clear sign that when you overexert yourself, your body will tell you. So these are clear signs. Just try and step back and say, okay, also the timeline I mentioned is to recognize that you are at a certain phase in your life and you have to make some crucial decisions. And you're in the same business here where first and foremost, you think about, finances. Have I got adequate finances for my what next? Which is a clear, important part of it. But there's a wider sphere of other things. I spoke to somebody on Monday. And by Tuesday, I had an email saying my husband was talking to somebody about what I said. And they said, you know what, I'm facing challenges. And one of the key challenges was relationship.
Yeah.
We don't think about it. We think, we've got a happy-go-lucky family. I've got all the support there. But when your role changes, the family dynamics changes, your relationship changes.
Well, but also, this is something that I've thought about in my life quite a lot. So not only in my life, but I had a conversation with a client of mine quite recently, and this particular client worked in Lloyd's of London for years, really well respected in that world, like in the insurance world, and then decided to stop. But because his social network and his work network were effectively one and the same, it's been a really difficult transition for him to think about, yes, they invite me along every now and again for drinks after work, but I'm not in that place of work anymore. So the conversation is different when I do go along. And that's been a bit of a challenge for him because he's found himself in a position where he's had to think about what he does socially with his friends. So I agree with you. When status changes, we need to think about these things in a bit more depth, don't we?
Yeah, there's a two aspect of the social side of it. One is through your career and profession. If you step out of your career and profession, you don't have nothing new to contribute to the conversation. Whereas
Yeah.
your colleagues or friends in profession are still talking about what happened yesterday, what happened today. Well, you don't have anything to contribute. So you feel a bit non-contributing members of that group, and you get sidelined in the conversation. Now, in the social environment, you could have long-standing friends, and there are certain common things you could talk about, like football, which is, that what is engages you, things like food, drinks, and things like that. So these are continuous conversation pieces. Now that you won't lose, but if you sort of moved out of the area, which is what I found, that when I moved out from Midland to London, I lost connection with things that we used to do there. So now I can't go back and talk about the past thing because things have happened in my absence. So I find a little disconnect, but I do find certain things of common that we can talk about.
I mean, but what's interesting, I was talking about this yesterday, is particularly for men, and Cassie, my wife, doesn't find this at all, but particularly for men, I went through a period of time in my life, probably mid to late 30s, where I was so busy with work that everything that I did was wrapped around work, including my social relationships. And I suppose the danger of that is when we're thinking about what happens next and whatever we've been doing for the last 30, 40 years is now less prominent. What do we do to replace some of those relationships that aren't going to be as prominent in our life in the next phase? And I've been conscious of it. So what I've done is invest more time in my social life outside of work, not linked to work at all, to make sure that I've got something a bit more sustainable that's outside of work. But it's a really interesting one. One thing you mentioned.
Sorry, Chris, it's an interesting point you brought there because it's a double-edged sword. If you, on one hand, you're focusing on something, it could be detriment to the other. Because if you say, right, okay, I need to replace my professional interaction with other people, so you find something else to do outside your family environment, which means that you're spending less time with the family. So there's a bit of a void and gap. Unless you strike a balance and say, look, I'm going to spend X amount of time with the family and X amount out.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think balance is a really interesting concept because I think there's no such thing as a perfect balance, right? It's always imperfect with an aspiration to try and get it better. But it's an interesting one. Tell me, it's a really interesting point you made earlier on about introspection, being able to sit with yourself and work out what you want. If you're not a natural at introspection, it doesn't come naturally to you, how do you get better at it, improve it, or use another technique to help you understand what you really want?
I can reflect on my personal experience because I was more of an extrovert rather than an introvert. So for me, a simple analogy, you wake up in the morning, you're in the bathroom, you're looking at this face in the mirror. How much time do you spend looking at that face? You can, to me, I could not get away fast enough from that face. And that was, an inhibition to address that person looking at me in the mirror.
Yeah.
Now, the idea was to actually, I said that we go around looking for relationships, friends, families, when you got parents, you got children, you form relationships. But your biggest relationship is with yourself. You wake up with you know your habit, you know what you like, but you avoid finding out more about who you are and your friends. So when you use that analogy and say, well, actually, let's explore who I am, what my likes are, my dislikes, what is it I like about myself? Maybe my looks, I'm a handsome chap, or maybe I talk nicely, or, anything positive to say, yeah, that's me. So that breaks you out of your introspection and say, right, okay, I recognize this thing. I mean, I know a lot of introverts who would sort of spend time on their own, but if you're an extrovert, it's very difficult to get into an introspection phase.
I do think there's a difference there, and I think like I know people who are really comfortable in their own company,
Yeah.
And are probably better at introspection than somebody who's a bit more gregarious and out there quite a lot. Now, we've talked about curiosity and the importance of curiosity as a characteristic when we're thinking about what happens next to guide our future lives. What are the other important characteristics you think people should consider when thinking about what's next?
I think going back to your question about what's next is, we run short of ideas because it's an overwhelm. The analogy I can use is, a rabbit in a headlight. You don't know which way to turn, which way to run.
Mm.
So the best step is to step back and then try and gain a sense of clarity. And the way to do that is, if you can't do it yourself, which could be a bit of a challenge, talk to somebody through a conversation. And somebody, who can facilitate a thought process. Ask questions that you've been scared to ask, or ask questions that, you didn't want to hear the answer.
Yeah.
And based on that, you can open up an avenue of thinking about what next. It gives you an idea, and it gives you a sense of clarity and another purpose that, I've still got time to do X, Y, and Z. Maybe go to the Himalayas or the Amazons. And these kind of things open up new avenues. And that takes you away from the overwhelm of what can I do next? Because
Yeah.
there's so much there. It's a bit like a cloud. You wait for the cloud to move on.
I absolutely agree. The book that I love on this particular subject is a book called Design Your Life by Bill Burnett. Amazing book. And it talks about how to apply design thinking that they use in a lot of the big car engineering firms. And design thinking is about iteration. So how do we just gradually get better? But applying it to our future lives. And one of the points that he makes really, really powerfully in the book is the next step isn't the final step. If you take tiny little steps towards, as you say, and again, for some people, a trip to the Himalayas or the Amazon might feel like a huge step, but then what's the natural next step that you can take? And if you end up going down a dead end or an alcove you don't want to be in, you just take a step back, and having that like gradual approach to change as opposed to that like sort of approach to change that has to happen completely overnight and fundamentally means that you've got a bit more freedom and flexibility in your life. So I really, really like that. Now,
it's very important that, like you said, take sort of small steps. When you're younger, you want to run. When you reach this age, you want to slow down and savor the way and get the benefit and enjoy the journey. So there's a sort of bit of a reflection on, contrasting of where you are in your 20s. You're full of energy and dynamics and aspirations. And you're struggling with the energy, aspirations. But then, you can pace yourself and identify what's the next step. And when you take the next step, the world changes. Then you take the next step because it's a different one to what you would have thought about from when you were on a 0 step.
Yeah, exactly. The last step informs your current step, doesn't it? That's the reality of it, potentially.
Correct.
Talk to me about, because one of the things that we're talking about a lot on What Happens Next is purpose and values. So if we're at a point where we've been really busy, we've sort of built the career, we've had the life, but we're thinking that whatever we're doing now isn't working for us immediately, and we're wondering what the next step is, and we're thinking about what I actually, like what's important to me as a human and what my purpose is on the planet, how do we get to a point where we are closer to identifying that?
It's always a work in progress because you're working on it. But the first port of call and start is, the conversation you just mentioned. Where do I go from here now? What is my purpose? Because you've fulfilled all the societal and institutional purpose that was given to you in life. Now you have the opportunity to redefine that. And to do that is you find what's of value to you, because there are certain intrinsic values you accumulated. Now you question that, is it applicable now? So then you flip your belief system into something else and say, okay, I've got the freedom to make the next step in this decision. What do I want to do?
Yeah.
And it's what I call, psychologists will call it subconscious programming. So you think it through and say, actually, I'd like to try this. And you'll find that, you'll find people who will guide you. And you think, you have the support that you need. So it becomes a magical journey, what I call. And with most of my clients, they will come up with ideas. All I just do is initiate their thought process.
Yeah.
And this is where sometimes if you're stuck, it's worth talking to somebody that, look, I've done all these things. I don't know what to do next. What can I do? So if somebody starts asking some deep questions, and here's the other thing is, we have very limited vocabulary. When we talk, we don't actually mean what we said. There's a deeper meaning behind that. There's apprehensions. There's, worries about what I'm saying. So your sentences are limited. But when you're in a relaxed space, people will actually open up and say, look, these are all the things I really want to enjoy. This is what I want to do. And then I usually say, quickly, write those down before you forget them.
Yeah. But that, I mean, it's interesting. And I've seen really good coaches in action, and they've not got any of the answers. The answers are always in it, right? But what they're really good at is asking great questions, and that's where the skill of really good coaching comes from, and that's why sort of coaches are certainly valuable. Talk to me a little bit about where you see people getting what happens next wrong. So I'm not saying that you can make like any fatal mistakes with getting what happens next wrong. But what I am saying is often people go on that path that they've been on for years, too long, up to a point where they're going, well, I'm not happy doing this anymore. So what, in your experience, why don't people make change earlier?
I think we all go through life's journey, and there are times when we have reminders along the way. Some people don't have those reminders. They're what I call on a fast lane of motorway. They're missing out all the clear signs to slow down.
Yeah,
and you miss out on your turnings, and then suddenly you realize, oh crumbs, I have to turn back again, another 10 miles or something like that. It's like that in life as well.
What's interesting? I had a conversation just before this one with a lady, professional lady I've known for years, lawyer, really successful, who had her dad passed away quite recently, and we were talking about that, and that was her big perspective changer. That sign of mortality from her own dad made her realise, well, actually, the stuff that I want to do, I'm probably not doing because I'm still on that path. And I think you're right. It is easy to ignore those signs, right? Those signs where we need to rethink.
Yeah, it seems to be common in, where you have a family network and, we think we are immortal and, you just plod along until something gives way. Somebody's not there anymore. And it's a clear reminder that, we are not here for, we are here for a limited time period. And then you sort of realize, and it's what I call defining moments in your life. It's a kick up your backside to realize something when you're moving forward. And they're key because, we all go through these things. I've been to funerals before, and in the beginning, I thought, oh, it's nothing. It's just somebody's gone by. Then you suddenly realize that I knew that person, but I can't interact anymore. So there's a sense of loss. And that loss can be something personal that I don't want to feel that loss again. So you try and fully fulfill or fill your life with something purposeful. And that's when, if you say, when a family structure is there, you are so used to this particular environment that you don't realize you are going through the aging process along the way. And, sometimes people are in the 60s and 70s, because I've known sandwich generations where their parents are in their 80s and 90s, they're in their 60s. So they think, oh, it's business as usual. and they're going to be here forever, and you're going to be here forever. But you don't realize that, in not too distant future, they won't be there. And then eventually you won't be there.
Yeah.
So that limited time awareness becomes very important to you. And I think that's where it takes you out of your comfort zone.
I mean, for somebody like me who loves Stoic philosophy, that concept of memento mori, remember death, because actually it makes you think about ensuring that your time on earth is worthwhile, is particularly powerful in terms of that. It's a really interesting concept. Pradip, you mentioned a few times about getting help, and I know you help a lot of people through the process of navigating this change. Where can people find out a bit more about you if they need to?
Thank you for that opportunity. I'm available right through my website, through my LinkedIn profile and my posts, so you learn a little bit more about who I am. There are real examples, life examples of my clients who've written down what they've benefited from interactions with me. There's articles that I've published or posted on LinkedIn and some on my website, which tells you certain different aspects of your life. So they are sort of thought-provoking articles. Otherwise, you got my email address, which is pradip@lifesmystery.co.uk, or just simply pick up the phone and give me a call, and we can make time together to have an initial chat at my cost. And that's at 07941 635319 if you're based in London, but it's a mobile, so can connect internationally as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time today, Pradip. Have a lovely day.
You too, Chris. Thank you for the opportunity, and we'll see you soon.
You're welcome.
If this is the first time you've listened to What Happens Next, welcome to the show. We are committed to making sure that we do as much as we can to help you navigate whatever's next in your life. And there's a home for What Happens Next, whathappensnext.life. We'd love for you to visit the site. On it, you will see loads of interviews, a link to take the What Happens Next quiz, an opportunity to sign up to the waiting list for the book, and much, much more. Take a look at the website, and we'd love to know what you think. So that was Pradip's interview. Hopefully you enjoyed that. I know I did and got a lot from it. We'll see you next time on What Happens Next.